The Case of the Golden Idol is one of my favorite games, and I only ever found out about it thanks to a suggestion from one of my longtime patrons, Nick Shadle. I have to thank Nick for bringing the game to my attention, but I also have to apologize because it took a very long time to figure out how to make a video about the soundtrack. The music taps into this really bizarre atmosphere, which fits in perfectly with the game's bizarre aesthetic and personality, but it wasn't easy to pinpoint what exactly is going on emotionally. It's really not your typical mystery fare. There's no hint of film noir mystique. There is a sense of creepiness, but not in the way a horror soundtrack would sound creepy. It's dark, but not really dissonant. It's creepy, but not really scary. It's not exactly mysterious, but it's definitely hiding something. The best word I have for the general musical aesthetic is intriguing. The music has an innocent, even folksy exterior, but with something menacing lurking just beneath the surface. For The Case of the Golden Idol, a game where you unravel a series of mysteries that end up being interconnected in ways you never imagined when you started, it's absolutely perfect. It's a delicate feeling to be able to capture so thoroughly, and I have to applaud composer Kyle Misko for his work. It's the kind of soundtrack that breaks all the rules and ends up sounding like nothing else out there. The main menu theme, The Watching Eye, is a perfect example of what I mean. The melody feels innocent on its own. In a simple, repeated rhythm, we start just moving straight up a C major arpeggio and then move on to other simple C major figures. It's pretty unassuming, except for these A-flat notes sprinkled into the 3rd and 5th bars. First as a harmony tucked under the main melody note, but then as the main melody note starting off bar 5, these A-flats are taken from the parallel key of C minor to inject some darkness into the theme, but they're carefully placed so as not to tip the balance of the phrase. We don't feel like we've changed keys at all, we just get a little flash of darkness before plowing forward in C major, just a vaguely sinister undertone to make us suspicious of the major key melody. This melody starts off unaccompanied except for the high held string note over top, but when full string chords come in underneath, we get a 4-chord progression that will loop for the entire piece, though this is not your standard pop 4-chord loop. There are two things about this progression that I think are really cool. The first is that the chords are individually each pretty bright sounding. We have C major, an A flat major 7, a D7 flat 5, which is the one crunchier one, and then a B flat 6. No real dissonance here in any individual chord. Even the D7 flat 5 sounds more weird than dissonant. It's not dark or threatening in the way a diminished chord or a D7 flat 9 would be. But chained in a row, these chords make a very jarring progression. Moving from C to A flat produces an audible clash as we're moving from the major key to notes from the minor key. Moving from A flat to D7 is a tritone leap, which sounds really unnatural. And moving from this D7, which wants to resolve up to a G, down to a B flat is surprising and entirely unsatisfying. It's very much a non-functional progression, and each chord move feels kind of awkward and jarring in a way that succeeds in making the listener vaguely uncomfortable, which is precisely the goal. Layering this discomfort underneath the basically sweet and simple major melody creates a beautifully suspicious disconnect, and this brings us to the second cool thing about this chord loop: how it lines up with the melody. We can see that only the C major chord here fits in the key of C major, so how does the plainly C major melody fit over top? Well, for the most part, the melody finds common tones between the key and the chord of the moment. The G to C over this A flat chord outlines the major 7th and 3rd of the chord, which works perfectly well. And the D7 flat 5 bars both emphasize a D and sneak in that A flat harmony note, which is the chord's flat 5th. But other bars see very intentional clashes trying to put the listener on edge. The A-flat melody note in bar 5, which would have fit perfectly over any of the other chords, is actually slipped in over our C major tonic, undercutting the stability of that chord on beat 1 of the bar right when we might have found a place of rest. The second phrase sees the melody over this A-flat chord jumping up to an E natural while having an E-flat in the accompanying string pad, inserting the famously dissonant minor ninth interval into the bar. The space between the E natural melody note and the E-flat in the chord reduces the severity of the dissonance. It doesn't sound dark or threatening, but it does sound alien and perverse. These are the types of choices that could come across as mistakes if they weren't in perfect balance. Executed as well as they are, though, they evoke a strange and suspicious quality. It's a brilliant mirror of Case of the Golden Idol's subject matter. Conspiracies, secret societies, dark magic, and murder, all hidden beneath a veneer of 18th century etiquette. You'll find similar types of musical discomfort all over the soundtrack. In the main reoccurring theme throughout the game, titled Gentleman Robber, we once again have a looping 4-bar chord progression that runs through the whole piece, but once again, this chord progression is extremely strange. I can honestly say I've never heard it before. Would it surprise you to know that this progression is made up entirely of major chords? So why doesn't it sound bright and cheerful? It sounds downright ominous. First, every single one of these chords includes an ugly semitone rub by adding in the 4th of the chord right above the major 3rd. This is not a suspended 4th chord, it's an add 4 chord, with the 3rd included too. And while I personally love these, it's a sound that's rare to find in the wild. The first few chords move from F add 4 to G add 4 and back, and then we shift to a series of major 7 chords in second inversion, meaning the 5th of the chord is in the bass rather than the root. These chords, A flat major 7 over an E flat, and C flat major 7 over a G flat, for example, also feature a semitone rub between the major 7th and the root, and these two notes occur a 3rd and 4th above the bass note. So it's really just a slightly different color on the same add 4 sound of the first few chords. The innocent exterior of the major chord is tainted with this semitone clash, a sure tell that beneath the mask is hiding a deadly secret. On top of this, these chords are all chosen to deliberately obscure what key the piece is even supposed to be in. Every chord clashes with the chord that comes after it, constantly pulling the rug out from under the listener and refusing to give an expected move until the very end of the chord loop. Something more typically ominous and threatening, like most horror game scores, will find ways to use dissonance and jarring chord combos to assault the listener, but finding ways to insert a level of dissonance and confusion while using a palette of all bright major chord sounds produces something more eerie than straight up threatening. The melody works to this effect beautifully too. Once again, we have a strong repeating phrase, and once again there are some clashing notes with the harmony that push their way through thanks to the strength of the melody and the eerie intentions of the piece. The main figure of the melody plays with 4 notes, D, E flat, F, and G flat, which together draw on the sinister sound of the harmonic minor scale. We get an implied E flat minor sound out of the E flat, F, and G flat notes, which would make the D natural we land on at the end an eyebrow-raising major 7th. The following bar repeats the phrase but changes the last note to resolve to the slightly less tense 6th, C. This bar is then bumped up a minor 3rd to outline a G-flat harmonic minor sound, and then the last bar seems to outline more of an E-flat Locrian sound, catching the flat 5th and flat 6th, but reinforcing the E-flat note on key beats at the end. It's a very dark, weird, uncomfortable melody, but the consistent rhythm and phrasing make it feel super solid. The best part is how much this melody clashes with the harmony. F add 4, G add 4, and A flat major 7 in no way fit in with the E flat harmonic minor scale, and the pairing of these two sounds gives us a series of unearthly clashing notes. The last bar might be the most bizarre, with A and B natural melody notes clashing horribly over the B flat bass note. There's so much tension here, but the shape of the melodic line is so strong, and it sits so high up in range, that we as listeners can just barely accept what's going on. Tense choices are always easier to swallow in a high register, and when the same add 4 chord voicings get dropped down to the low register of the piano, they take on a much more ominous quality. Having a semitone played so low in range is a recipe for psychic damage, but the tension has a particular flavor that's distinct from your more typical tritones and diminished chords and what have you. It took a while to transcribe this piece because all of my usual go-tos for low dissonant sounds didn't quite capture the right feeling. Over top of these low dissonances, the melody returns at double speed, giving a whole new collection of clashing notes against the harmony. It's a weirdly catchy melody. I've had this figure stuck in my head, even though it's not at all something you'd typically consider an earworm. The disconnect between the melody and the harmony of these pieces makes the music feel so untrustworthy. It's like we're constantly watching our backs, unsure of exactly where the harmony and melody are going to clash, but the strength of the melody and the major chords in the harmony force us to keep up an appearance of trusting our surroundings. Maybe the most extreme example of mismatched melody and harmony comes from one of the climactic moments in the game, titled Crowning Celebration. And this piece might have the most dramatic example of a hidden darkness to the music of the whole soundtrack as well. We start with a slow violin melody fading in among the sounds of the waves crashing on the beach, playing a simple pentatonic melody in the key of G major. You'll have noticed all of the music takes on a vaguely Baroque flavor, restraining the musical palette to strings and harpsichords and acoustic guitars and such, in keeping with the 18th century setting. Here, the solo violin melody and sparse chunking chord accompaniment are slowly joined by more and more voices until we eventually have big, full string chords playing a looping G major progression. The piece plods away in this direction for a while, but at a certain point we start to leave the 18th century and an otherworldly sound begins to take hold of the music. The violin melody begins to shift upwards in pitch, slowly moving out of tune until it ends up a half step above where it started. The chordal accompaniment stays in the original tuning, giving the feeling of the melody drifting away from solid ground. There's a palpable unease that comes along with the gradual mismatch in tuning between the melody and the chords. The strings then drop out and are replaced with a guitar playing a new, darker bass line in triplets beneath, now outlining the key of C minor rather than our original G major, and the melody slowly begins shifting down in pitch over the course of 8 bars until it settles onto a just slightly flat E major. eagle-eared listeners may notice that this new bass line in the guitar feels somewhat familiar. That's because it's the return of the chord loop from the first piece, the watching eye, C to A flat to D to B flat. The pitch-shifting violin line doesn't line up at all with this harmony, and so the music feels like it's falling apart. This culminates in the piece unraveling into ghostly wailing and violin screeching over top of this repeated C, A flat, D, B flat loop. Eventually, extra fourth intervals are layered on top of these bass notes, intentionally chosen for dissonance against the bass line to create some truly unhinged sounds. A new, cheery pentatonic violin melody gives us some reprieve, this time in the key of E, but it eventually pitch shifts up again, stretching up to the key of G major. And when it gets there, the old G major accompaniment figure comes back underneath the new melody as a return to the familiar. It feels like we've escaped the darkness, but the piece doesn't stop there. Haunting low guitar triplets creep in to decontextualize the G major key and turn it into E minor, putting a dark tinge onto what we thought we knew. The opening G major violin melody comes back, but the new guitar part totally changes the feel. Underneath the melody, triplet guitar figures throw a C7 chord into the midst among the E minor and F sharp minor sounds, adding another jarring harmonic twist to familiar material to cement this feeling of broken trust. Every decision in this piece was made to create a feeling of unease. A bunch of different musical ideas, each individually sounding quite pleasant, are cobbled together in a jarring, unsettling way. Again, it's the maintaining of a light-hearted mask on top of these ominous sounds that makes the whole piece feel so unhinged. We're not going for the giant tentacle monster trying to rip off your face, we're going for a more subtle creepiness. The feeling you get when you're not sure if you can trust someone, but you have to play along with them until you can prove your suspicions are valid. It's a perfect musical execution for the point in the game where this track plays. It's a scene where the player finally gets through some of the mysteries and begins to see the true nature of what they've been investigating all this time. There have been lots of games that tackled mystery music well, balancing ambience and tension, but none have attained the atmosphere of unraveling Baroque conspiracy theory quite like the case of the Golden Idol. Thanks again to Nick Shadle for the suggestion, and thank you all for watching.